On this Tuesday night, a developmentally delayed woman sent to jail.
I really didn't think she would be charged for just being herself.
The system that failed her and the fight to get her the help she needs. A Global News exclusive. Snow catastrophe on the West Coast.
I just want to get off this flight. It's been far too long.
Air travel paralyzed with passengers stranded on planes for hours.
I just think it's something completely unacceptable.
The so-called Secretary of Evil convicted for her part in the Nazi Holocaust. And Argentina's heroic homecoming. The ecstasy and the agony as millions flood the nation's capital to celebrate their World Cup win.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Chris Galis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We'll get to those stories in a moment, but we begin with breaking news in Toronto, where 8 teenage girls are now charged with the murder of a 59-year-old man. The young suspects, none older than 16 years, allegedly attacked the man in downtown Toronto just after midnight Sunday. Brittany Rosen joins us now with more details on the crime. Brittany?
We're here at York and University Avenue in downtown Toronto, the site of where a violent, fatal stabbing took place over the weekend. According to Toronto police, a 59-year-old man was swarmed and then stabbed to death, the suspects being as young as 13 years old. Now, this happened just after midnight. As for the girls, they were arrested nearby, and I just want to reiterate their ages. 3 of them being 13 years old, 3 of them being 14 years old, and 2 of them being 16 years old. According to investigators, they all met through social media and are believed to have been residing and attending school in all different parts of the city. Only a few of them had been in contact with police prior to this, but at this point, investigators are not describing them as a gang. However, all 8 have been charged with second-degree murder.
We don't know how or why they met on that evening and why the destination was downtown Toronto. We don't know how long they've been acquainted together with each other, but I wouldn't describe them as a gang at this point.
Now, at this point, police are not releasing the name or identity of the 59-year-old victim. They are still in the steps of notifying next of kin, but they describe this individual as falling on hard times, someone who was recently introduced into the shelter system and just, again, fell on hard times. He has a supportive family in this area. But police do believe that there could have been other altercations on the 17th and the 18th over this weekend, and so they're asking any witnesses or anyone who may have additional information about these altercations that took place by this group of 8 teenage girls. Brittany Rosen, Global News.
Police have now named the victims of the weekend's mass shooting in Vaughan, north of Toronto. The gunman, in his 70s, killed 5 people and injured another, choosing his victims after a years-long dispute with the condo board. Mike Drolet has new details about the events leading up to the shooting.
After 2 days of chaos, a calmness has fallen over this Vaughan, Ontario condo building, yet not enough time has passed to offer clarity for the grieving.
They're all wonderful people, and this is a tight community. This is so sad, and it's going to take all of us a long time to get over this.
On Sunday night, 73-year-old condo resident Francesco Villi took his handgun and knocked on the doors of 3 other units. He shot and killed 5 members of the condo board, including Rita Camilleri, Navid Dada, Vittorio Panza, Russell Manick, and Helen Manick. A 6th victim, Doreen DeNino, is in hospital in serious but stable condition after being shot in the face.
There was a knock at my door, and she opened the door and she was shot. Everything happened so quickly. The shooting happened. My primary focus was my wife's well-being and our safety.
Villi had been in a fight with the condo board for years over electromagnetic waves he believed to be emanating from the electrical room under his unit. It's unclear what, if anything, was done, but Villi wasn't happy and began a campaign of harassment in person and online.
Very soon, all you blind people, you can stay in darkness for eternity. You may have the chance to reincarnate it for purification, but that is entirely up to you.
In November 2018, the Condo Corporation started court proceedings against Vili, which led to an order in 2019 for him to stop harassing residents.
I will speak to my last breath and assert against these criminals.
He didn't stop and was found in contempt of court and fined $30,000 in September 2021. But the harassment continued, and in a last desperate move, the board looked to have him evicted in a hearing scheduled the day after he went on his shooting rampage.
You know, on the surface, it would appear that there were some red flags, but I don't know that anybody could ever predict this kind of an ending, that somebody would go to this extent.
It's a tragic story that residents of this building may never fully come to grips with. Mike Drolet, Global News, Vaughan, Ontario.
A Saskatchewan family is horrified their intellectually disabled daughter was sent to jail instead of receiving the support programs she should be entitled to. The pandemic is partly to blame, and Heather Yourex-West reports on the heartbreaking circumstances facing this family.
Curiosity about new arrivals is normal at the Pine Grove Correctional Centre, but when Jessica Stuckey arrived here in November, some inmates were immediately concerned.
They were worried.
Stuckey, one inmate told this prisoner advocate, was distraught and did not seem to understand why she was there.
She had told me that her concerns were like, Sherry, there's something really wrong. She's like childlike. She shouldn't be here.
Stuckey is 24 and has a genetic chromosomal abnormality called Smith-Magenis syndrome. It's left her with intellectual disabilities.
She is kind of paused at a developmental stage of about 6 years old, meaning that normally she would hopefully have a lot of community supports, which would help keep her out of trouble.
When the pandemic hit in 2020, many of those supports went virtual,
which was particularly hard on people who needed that human connection. And Jessica really needs human connection. So unfortunately, Jessica started reaching out to the RCMP.
Police say Stuckey began calling 911 multiple times a day, threatening to hurt herself and others. Police also said she threatened to kill 2 support workers. But instead of getting help suited to her needs, Stuckey was arrested, charged with mischief and uttering threats, denied bail, and placed into the penal system.
I could feel people's frustration in dealing with her, but in a way, given her syndrome, I really didn't think she would be charged for just being herself.
A medical assessment was court-ordered, but because the nearest psychiatric hospital was full, Stuckey ended up at Pine Grove, a correctional remand center where she remained for 36 days until being found not criminally responsible for her actions. Now she's in a psychiatric hospital until a provincial review board determines her fit for release.
I'm horrified, honestly, that she would spend so much time in remand. There must be a better way when we know that someone is struggling with such a disability. The criminal justice system is just not the place to fix that problem.
Stuckey's psychiatrist agrees. In an email to Global News, Dr. Ken Harrison said Jessica's intellectual disability is not something that can be treated in an acute stabilization psychiatric hospital setting, as there is nothing with her intellectual disability to stabilize. Instead, he's been recommending she receive intensive community supports through a Regina-based organization for the past 2 years. Though every effort to access enough provincial funding for Jessica to enter the program have failed. Harrison said, over the last 2 years, Jessica has made hundreds of calls to emergency services, mainly secondary to loneliness on her part and not feeling that her needs were being met. Subsequently, with some of the defining characteristics of Smith-Magenis syndrome being impulsivity and a tendency towards aggression, this culminated in the charges that were eventually filed. In a statement, a Saskatchewan ministry spokesperson tells Global News the province partners with third-party service providers to intellectually disabled adults in a way that best suits their individual needs, adding, quote, We want Jessica Stuckey and her family to know we understand their concerns and are here as a support. But that support, Jessica's mother says, has only led Jessica to the criminal justice system.
She's got so many questions. She doesn't really understand what's happening. I don't know whether to encourage her or discourage her, or I don't know what to say to her.
It's why she's making her daughter's experiences public, hoping the next time someone with intellectual disabilities needs help, they don't end up in handcuffs instead. Heather Yourex-West, Global News.
Winter officially arrives tomorrow, but southern British Columbia has already been hit hard by a snowstorm. Many Canadian cities would struggle with 30 centimeters of snow overnight. But for the West Coast, it's catastrophic. One of Canada's busiest airports, Vancouver International, received 27 centimeters, forcing all arriving flights to be suspended for about 9 hours. Passengers were left waiting, some stranded on planes that sat on the tarmac for up to 12 hours. Emily Lazatin reports on the airport chaos during the busiest travel days of the year.
Planes stuck on the tarmac for more than 8 hours, nowhere to go. Even those arriving who made it to their gates were left in the dark and nearly out of food.
There's people in here with diabetes that don't have their meds, don't have food. So yeah, it's just really bad, honestly.
We're getting pretty restless right now, just trying to, get a sense of direction, try to figure out, when are we going to get off this plane?
The heavy snow causing numerous delays and cancellations. A ground stop in effect, halting flights from arriving. Even with plows out and shovels in hand, the damage was already done.
We backed up about 15 feet, and then we stayed on the tarmac for about 7.5 hours. And then they said that, unfortunately, due to weather conditions, we couldn't make it out.
The frustration on the tarmac also felt inside. People trying to make do, finding a place to sleep and stay warm. YVR staff pitching in, bringing snacks to people waiting inside. Airport officials just saying that crews are working hard to get operations back to normal and luggage back to people.
We've been waiting in the arrivals area to see about our luggage. Do we get it? Do we not get it? No one has told us a thing.
5 days before Christmas, it looks like some will be spending the night here. There's some hope flights are making it out, just at a very slow pace.
I think we're going on the same plane. Okay, we're going to rebook you guys at 9 o'clock tonight, and check-in counter opens at 4 o'clock.
Emily Lazatin, Global News, Richmond, BC.
There was chaos and backlogs on the roads, too. Vehicles slid out or got stuck on hills. Plows couldn't keep up, and even major highways in and around Vancouver were covered in slippery, compacted snow. The Ministry of Transportation told drivers to avoid all non-essential travel in the Lower Mainland and central Vancouver Island, and more than 24 ferries connecting the two regions were canceled. The fallout after some struggling veterans were offered medical assistance in dying. Coming up, the departure at Veterans Affairs Canada. Some major new developments today in a story Global News first broke back in August. A spokesperson for Veterans Affairs Canada confirms the employee who improperly discussed medical assistance in dying with at least 4 veterans is no longer employed at the department. Mercedes Stevenson joins us now with the details. Mercedes.
Chris, Global News has learned the Veterans Affairs Canada employee who inappropriately raised medical assistance in dying with at least 4 veterans is no longer working for the department. A spokesperson for Veterans Affairs Minister Lawrence Macaulay's office told Global News that the departure came after a protracted labor relations process was resolved this week. The government would not say if the employee was fired or received severance. The move comes after a firestorm of outrage in the veterans community. Back in August, Global News broke the story that the VAC employee in question called a combat veteran out of the blue to tell him that the traumatic brain injury treatment he was looking at was very expensive. And the veteran said that the employee then repeatedly suggested that she could instead help him seek medical assistance in dying as an alternative, raising it repeatedly, even after he told her to stop. The veteran said the service agent agent went on to tell him that she had helped another veteran access resources for medical assistance with dying and that he had gone through with the process and that option was better than him, quote, blowing his brains out or driving his car into something. The interaction left the veteran disgusted and concerned that other vets may have had the same experience as him, something the department initially denied but then later admitted to. An internal investigation confirmed that at least 4 veterans were offered medical assistance in dying, dating back to 2019. In November, the cases were referred to the RCMP for a potential criminal investigation. Chris?
Mercedes Stevenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes. Canada is reportedly set to spend an estimated $7 billion on 16 F-35 fighter jets. The Canadian press says the Department of National Defence recently received quiet approval to buy the fighter jets along with the related gear. The Liberal government hasn't confirmed the report, only saying that the 88 advanced fighter aircraft outlined in Canada's defence policy will be acquired. She's the so-called Secretary of Evil. Just ahead, why her trial could be the last of its kind. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited frontline troops in the eastern city of Bakhmut, where some of the fiercest fighting in recent weeks has taken place. His country is now marking 300 days since the Russian invasion. Explosions rang out in the distance as the president thanked residents and soldiers for their strength and motivation and held a moment's silence for lives lost. The conflict in Ukraine has killed tens of thousands of people, driven millions from their homes, and reduced cities to ruins. More than 75 years after the end of the Second World War, a German court convicted a 97-year-old woman who worked as a secretary at a Nazi concentration camp. She was found guilty of being an accessory to the murder of more than 10,000 people. Redmond Shannon reports.
Irmgard Furchner arriving to face justice after 3/4 of a century. The 97-year-old was a typist in the commander's office at Stutthof concentration camp in what is now eastern Poland. The court decided she knowingly and willingly supported the cruel death of more than 10,000 prisoners during the Second World War. It handed her a suspended sentence of 2 years in prison. The German state prosecutor said Furchner's job allowed her to know exactly what was happening in the camp. When the trial began last year, she fled her care home before being apprehended in a nearby city. During proceedings, a historian gave judges a tour of Stutthof, showing them how Furchner would have been able to see the camp's brutal conditions from her office. Weeks into the trial, she told the court, "I'm sorry about everything that happened. I regret that I was in Stutthof at the time. That's all I can say." It was only in 2011 that the German legal precedent for complicity in the Holocaust was set in the trial of death camp guard John Demjanjuk.
I think it's time to recognize that as the world community, we failed to really prosecute the people who were part of the Nazi killing machine.
Most potential suspects are now dead or very old. Canada's last known wartime Nazi, Helmut Oberlander, died last year before he could be deported to Germany.
If there's one hope that comes from this entire thing is that people will learn about the terrible things that were done to Jews simply because of the fact that they were Jews, and that they will remember where anti-Semitism can lead to.
Furchner's conviction may be the last such lesson the world learns, at least from the Second World War. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
World Cup champions. Next, incredible scenes from Argentina's homecoming parade. Buenos Aires, Argentina turned into a street party with massive crowds today. Millions celebrating the crowning achievement of their national soccer team and superstar Lionel Messi. Ross Lord reports.
After winning the top prize in the world's most popular sport, the government declared this a bank holiday in Argentina so everyone could celebrate. This fan says he's been crying tears of joy for days. Almost 40 years after Argentina last won the World Cup, its sensational victory over France on Sunday redefines jubilation. This fan says the team united the country to enjoy a wonderful moment. An opportunity to take their minds off grim realities, like a staggering inflation rate of 92%, among the highest in the world. By some estimates, more than 1 million people gathered to celebrate in the streets of Buenos Aires, the congestion immobilizing the players' bus and forcing them at one point to be moved to a helicopter. The main focus of the throng's adoring eyes is Lionel Messi, a likable superstar whose pursuit of the World Cup in 4 previous attempts had come up empty. Some Argentinians resented Messi for moving away and playing professional soccer for a team in Spain. To soccer fans around the world, Messi's triumph confirms his position as the greatest player of all time. This couple traveled from India to Buenos Aires, anticipating Messi would come through.
Messi is in the heart of 30 million Indians. We know Messi will win, Argentina will win. It's from our heart.
At age 35, Messi says his World Cup days are over. Fitting, it seems, now that he's brought the game's most coveted prize home and put any remaining doubts to rest. Ross Lord, Global News.
And that's Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Chris Galis. Tonight's Your Canada is this festive front yard in McGregor, Manitoba, just west of Portage la Prairie. We love to see your festive Canada photos, so please email them to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching.